You've heard of world building, right? If you haven't, well, come on, you have. Even if you aren't familiar with the term itself, you have seen Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. You just have. Those fancy cities and mountains and cultures and languages and histories and magic and economies and animals and oceans are all world building. It is all of that and so much more. It's an art form in its own right, and one that I think everyone would benefit from on some level, even if you barely think of it most of the time. And more than that, it's just fun. Like, I may be biased here, but it's just grand ol' fun. Like, come on, in what other art form is it perfectly normal for you to develop the intricate economics of a society of butterfly folk who live on Mars? But I guess I should do a little more explaining than that if I wish to convince you. I recognize that some of you may not be fully familiar with world building and its process, even if you have seen Lord of the Rings, so let me get to the all of that part in a bit more detail. If you've never tried to write a fantasy or sci-fi novel, and I can forgive you if you haven't, it is a very daunting thing, then the most you've probably been exposed to world building is on the screen, or in the pages of a book. What it means is in the name itself. Since this is how a lot of people are first exposed to the art, I'm gonna pretend you're a fantasy/sci-fi author. Without loss of generality, you'll be writing fantasy. So you, the fictional fantasy fabulist I'm talking about, want to write a story. You want it to be cool and have a complex cast of characters, but they can't just be in the void of the page, so you need a world to put them in. You could go fairly generic with it and make basically a copy of what you think the Lord of the Rings world is like. Tolkien elves and dwarves and goblins and orcs and whatnot. Similar sounding names and places so you don't have to put much thought into it. This is fine and dandy if that's the vibe you're going for. But if you feel, like me, that this is a little bland, then you can take a more active role in your world. There are many paths in creating your own world, none of which are right or wrong, but all have the potential to be wildly exciting. You could start from the universe as a whole, and spiral down through the galaxy and solar system to the planet, its continents and its peoples. Or you could start by building a town around a lazy creek, then a nation around that town, then a planet around that nation, and so on and so forth. You could be as broad or as detailed as you want. You can tinker with the inner specifics of the magic system until it all clicks like a well-oiled machine, or you could give it an air of mystery and true magic. Every city and mountain could have its own history and personality, or the world could be nebulous outside a single village, a mere fog from which you gather inklings of legends and outer culture. You could draw detailed maps of your world and continents while not really focusing all that much on, well, the other parts. Definitely not speaking from experience. All those options, along with everything in between, can cascade into years of tending to whatever size world you form. If you look at the state of modern fantasy, you'll find worlds on all ends of the spectrum, from grim-dark hellscapes to magical fairylands, to magical fairylands, to the strangest of the strange, worlds that are infinite libraries, or are entirely contained on a mote of dust, or have utterly alien biospheres. That's the wonder of having your own world. You can make it whatever you want it to be. You may see where this is going. More on that in a moment, though. For first, I feel I should answer what's probably a burning question of yours. How do I do all this? Should I start with a pen and paper, or in a notes doc on my laptop? All these options for where to start are fine and dandy, but what if I can't choose between them all? If I could talk to my past self, back when I was more seriously getting into world building, I would tell them to latch on to whatever idea started me thinking about building that world, that central idea, and just randomly sketch off of it. Whatever happens on the page, they can decide what they want to keep. chances are something else will work better for you. Thus is the value of self-experimentation. But if you're having serious trouble finding a starting point, here's an idea. Just let the pen or pencil have a mind of its own. Even if you aren't good at sketching, who cares? You don't have to show it to anyone. Anyways, onto the where of you may see where this is going. Every time one of my universes is on the ball of my pen, or the tips of my fingers on my keyboard, I try to call upon my favorite muse, my child self, to channel that infinite joy I got from scribbling planets on sheets of printer paper, and sketching fictional paleo-organisms and time periods, because I was really into paleontology. It's this form of childlike wonder, this unbounded artistic creation done simply for the sake of it. No higher goal of selling a product or doing it for others' approval. Just giving form to that inspired energy locked in your skull. That's what this video's about. That's the sort of feeling that I want you to experience if you haven't. And if you have, I encourage you to feel it more. Also, I don't mean to demean the form of the craft that authors do to make their settings feel alive. World building for enlivening other art is awesome, and I'll be mentioning more examples later than just writing. But that's spoilers for the video you're watching right now. Lamau. This little section is me fangirling over how cool just world building for the sake of world building is. I may be biased because I do it all the time and most of my stories grew out of the worlds I create, but hey, the inspirations for those came from somewhere, from wonderful worlds and cultures that I adore. Too often I find myself starting a creative project with the end goal of making enough money to live off of it, and I don't like that. I don't want to do that. I have to hold back from going into an anti-capitalist rant about the evils of the necessity of money. It's soul-sucking, especially when you pour so much passion into a thing, then release it to little attention. The best way to have your spirits fall is to make them high in the first place. Even if you make a living off your art, you don't have to sell all your art. I encourage you to do it in some form at least once a week. It's so refreshing. And world building is an art form that you're not expected to sell on its own anyways. Who's gonna buy a detailed guidebook to a fantasy world not connected to an established franchise? I mean, okay, I know that there's a market for everything, but the market for that flavor of content is not huge. So, if there's any homework for this video, it's to start with a blank page and just start creating your own world. Don't start with a series of novels in mind, just create. What excites you? What are you passionate about? The obvious interests are stuff like history or economics or meteorology, but I believe any interest can be the focus of world building. Like collecting coins? Make up cool fictional coins, either from real or fake places, and attach histories to them. Into fashion? Design clothes for fictional cultures. Have a fixation for owls? Think of the coolest owl species you know, and make a species that's even cooler. Into something math-heavy, like theoretical physics. I mean, half the process of theoretical physics is basically just world building, but with math. I mean, have you ever seen string theory? So just do that, but with no expectation of being right about the world. Make up outlandish physics. Have fun with math. It's really fun. I've tried it before. But Uluscri, I'm not interested in anything creative. Great! Then you can channel all your creativity into world building about that topic. It's so flexible, so open-ended. As with all art, there are no limits. There are no international rules for world building, and if there are, and I've just never seen them, then I say don't listen to them. It's for this precise reason that this video is not a how-to guide for world building. Like all art, your method will be different from everyone else, and it's for you to discover through your own joyous practice. If you take any advice from this video, it's to not follow everything in world building tutorials. There are a lot of good tools to be found in them, but not every tool will be right for you, and even the tools you do use will have to be tweaked to fit your needs. There are no right ways to build a mountain, or anything for that matter. I've thought about making a series of videos on how I world build, in case y'all might find it helpful. If I do go ahead with it, don't expect it to be another tutorial. I'm not going to tell you the magic way to world build correctly. I would simply be providing the tools I use in case you might find them useful. If the desire for such a series itches at some corner of your brain, then do comment about that itch below, and maybe go to a doctor if it persists. But anyways, I implore you, go create your funny little worlds, not only so that I can have fun reading about them, but also for your own enjoyment. I've found world building to be a wonderful pastime, and I think it can serve much the same purpose for a lot of people, so there you have it. Go do it. Also, if you already have your own worlds you want to share, feel free to in the comments. I love hearing about the products of people's creativity, so provide them below, and I will read them. I recognize this video's homework may not be for everyone. Not everyone has the time or energy to work on a whole world. Maybe you want to practice some world building before diving straight into a big project. That's fine. It can be daunting to skydive, so sometimes you just gotta go to those wind tunnel skydiving places first. You get what I mean. What I'm about to say also isn't exclusive to people just starting out. You can practice this as a decade-seasoned world builder if you so please. It's something I want to do more myself anyways, because it's honestly just really fun. On to the thing. Daydreaming. We do it all the time. Our minds like to wander and drift through the landscapes of our thoughts. At least mine does, and if you're a fellow creative at heart, then chances are yours does too. I propose adding a level of direction to your daydreaming. Now I know that takes some of the dreamlike wandering quality away from the experience, but I think it's worth it. No pressure to keep notes or anything. You don't even have to remember it if you don't want to. Just you and the Etch-a-Sketch that is your short-term memory. So, you're driving or riding in a car. Maybe you're on a long trip. The world melts by your window. Pretend you know nothing about the cities and landscapes you're going through, even if geography is a fixation of yours. Let an air of magic infuse everything you see, and try to plant stories and histories into your newfound mystery. You might be rolling through a major city. To your eyes now tinged with creation, it becomes a sci-fi metropolis. How did that building get there? What corporation ordered its construction, and what nefarious things are going on in there? Now there's hills going by. Maybe it's a fantasy world, or something stranger still, where each hill is the buried shell of a giant turtle, each with their own histories. That tree has been here for 1,000 years. What has it seen? And who's that walking down the street? What's their life like? What's their story? That squirrel perched on that branch there, what dreams do they have? It doesn't even have to be about your visual world. Something I discovered recently was the fun of taking a musician and trying to fit all their songs into the same musician universe. Like, all Bill Wirt's songs are being sung by the same character, and oh boy, what does that world look like? My partner has been daydreaming about this exact thing, and it's awesome. Also, go check out Natanya or Yanusawi if you haven't already. That's my partner, they're awesome. Doesn't have to be music either. Could be paintings or podcasts or Minecraft builds. Every time I consume art, there's some level of world building going on there about what I think the art means and what its creator must have been like when they made it. What you come up with can be as connected or as inconsistent as you like, as intricate or as vibes-based, sci-fi or fantasy or anything else. Unstop the cork holding that energy in, and let the brain flow and play. That's the real purpose of this exercise. I mean, I find it typically also brings joy just for the sake of it, but if you wish to get something grander out of this, then treat it as practice in letting your mind run free. I find that problems in starting creative projects have more to do with my mind and its creative energies than some lack in my artistic abilities. Sure, I don't know professional methods of water painting, but that's not going to stop me from putting it on the page if my creativity demands it. I've tried making some really bad music, but it's still music. It's something I made, and if I keep following that creative energy where it wants to go, maybe someday my music will be good enough to share with the wider world. When I let myself daydream onto the world around me, it makes it easier for my mind to ignore those sorts of technical limitations. World building, like any art form, has its techniques and advanced methods. It is daunting if you're just taking the first steps. But I hope that this method turns those steps from a rough mountain trail into a delightful stroll through the park. Remember how I said I would get around to talking about world building to enliven art, other than fantasy or sci-fi stories, that is? Well, now is the moment that I deliver on that promise. Much like daydreaming, this form of world building can be done as a beginner or a, quote, master, whatever that means, and everything in between. It's not meant to be the focus of the art it's enriching, so you can do as much of it as you please. I would say the vast majority of art out there had some level of world building done in the background, even if whoever made it didn't or wouldn't have used that word to describe what they were doing. At this point in the video, and if you've watched this far, thank you so much, you should know what world building for art would entail, but I'll say it anyways. It's adding story and lore to the background, either clearly visible in the art itself or as a treat for anyone who looks further into the maze of details. Though you may have already been doing this without attaching a name to it, I think there's value to giving it that nameness. It grants it a soul, an intentionality that I can use to deepen the art that I make, and I think that's really special. Even if you have been doing something very similar just under a different name, keep that name. I would be loath to push away a name you cherish just to replace it with what I think is cool. Name it what you think is cool. Accuracy isn't a thing when labeling such broad terms as world building. But anyways, the world can be something you build off of, or build during the process of making your art. From the outside, it may not be easy to tell which path you go, or at least if there is a way to tell, I don't know it, though you'll probably be able to tell for your own art, so I recommend you experiment with both, whatever works for you. I personally like having pieces connected by a shared world, but of course you don't have to do the same. You can invent a new story for everything you create. And this sort of thing can be done for any medium. It's part of the wonder of world building. The classic examples I always think of are the poems and songs in the pages of The Lord of the Rings. They're contained within novels, but I see them as art in and of themselves. Love was clearly put into them, and not a one isn't immersed in Middle-earth and its wider world, and it shows even if you didn't know they were from a book. I partially use this example because it's something I want to see more of. Collections of poetry set in a world other than our own. There's something uniquely magical to it. The other examples I have are both musical. The first is from an artist I've already done a corner for cool creations for, Pilot Red Sky. If you go to his channel and scroll through the thumbnails, you'll find not only a theme of animals and this guy, whose name is canonically Percy Roger Smith, you'll find a story about how Percy is digitally painting these scenes, opening a booth, having only his mom buy his art, then getting his car towed. Not only is the music really good, but the story going on in the background adds that extra layer of depth that I really like. And it's not even an obvious story either. Like, if you just saw the images alone and you didn't analyze them at all, then you wouldn't get the full picture. Art that rewards exploration and closer attention to detail is the sort of thing that is my shit. The other music example is this video's corner for cool creations, where I showcase a piece of art that I think is really cool. It's Nobonoko's album Gato, which, as you might notice, is ostensibly not made by Nobonoko, but two guys named David Wolkichowski and Victor Fritsche. Hopefully I pronounced those right. When you click on the video, a really cool animation comes up before the full album art, where you'll come to learn the two dudes are not human. If you go to the description, you'll get a whole fictional tale about how these two met and started making their fictional album Gato, which is probably the coolest way to frame an album I've ever seen. The music itself feels like it has that extra little bit of life poured into it because of that. I think you should definitely check it out, especially since all the music in the background has been Nobonoko's. So yeah, that's my case for you adding at least a hint of world building into your life. It's that breeze that breathes fairy laughter into your heart, the depth in the sky, the lives of every blade of grass beneath your feet. If you gain nothing else from this video, I hope you go with a greater appreciation for the stories behind the stories and the worlds behind the art you enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. This is definitely my longest scripted video, so if you enjoyed it, please do the YouTube things. I can't promise how long it'll be until my next video is out. I'll have updates on my Discord. I'll try to have updates on my YouTube community tab, so look at those places. And again, if you have a world you're building yourself, don't be afraid to do some self-promotion in the comments or over on my Discord. I'm always looking for cool new things to absorb. I may not answer terribly fast because I keep myself very busy, but I try to look at everything that gets commented or sent to me. I also have a Ko-Fi if you wish to support me monetarily. One day I may have a Patreon, but I'm still brainstorming what I would want to do with it. You know, I want it to be worthwhile. I don't want to waste anyone's time and money with it. And especially right now, I don't feel I have the numbers for it, but yeah. With that, I hope your day is swell, and go absorb the world some. Goodbye.